President Trump is in New Jersey, where he will spend the weekend at his Bedminster Golf Club. The trip comes after all that backlash over his comments on Russia in Helsinki. Standing next to Russian President Vladimir Putin, Trump appeared to accept Putin's claim that Russia did not meddle in the 2016 election. The president backtracked a day later, saying he misspoke. The comments, though, garnered a lot of criticism, both from Democrats and Republicans, even the president's own director of national intelligence, Dan Coats. And then, in a tweet Thursday, the president raised eyebrows even further, even higher, when Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said Trump was inviting Putin to Washington in the fall. In what would be the first visit, it would be the first visit for a Russian president since back in 2010. Politico reporter and co-author of Politico Playbook, Daniel Lippman, is in Washington to discuss all of this. Plenty to discuss. Okay, yes. The president obviously faced a lot of, Democrats are always on the president, but even Republicans across the spectrum on the conservative side were not happy with the president. So he walks this back a day later. Has that eased their concerns?
A little bit, but he's been walking back his walk back. Even today, he was tweeting about what's wrong with having a good relationship with Putin. And so it seems like his White House advisors can only convince him so much to actually keep to the tough on Russia line. And Trump himself said this week that he's the toughest president that there ever has been on Russia. And yet he has this very close relationship with Vladimir Putin. And so it's this split screen that is really confusing a lot of people and leading a lot of Republicans to worry about this going forward. During the heat of the midterm election season, you don't want Vladimir Putin in Washington.
Speaking of his advisors and what influence they do or don't have, we mentioned Intelligence Chief Dan Coats publicly criticizing the president's handling of this meeting with Putin. We have sound of that. Let's take a listen.
But it's undeniable that the Russians are taking the lead on this. Basically, they are the ones that are trying to undermine our basic values, divide us with our allies. They are the ones that are trying to wreak havoc over our election process. We need to call them out on that. It's critical that we do so. I think we will learn more, but that is the president's prerogative. If he had asked me how that ought to...
And Coats, of course, also kind of chuckled when he learned on the stage that Putin would be coming to Washington. What did you make of someone, this is a presidential appointee, criticizing his boss? Would you be worried for your job if you were Coats?
A little bit, but Trump does not like to fire people, and it would create even more... I
don't know. Have you seen the TV show?
Yeah, but not in real life. That was a TV show. We're on CBS, and so you guys well know that. And so in person, he will leave Pruitt, for example. He left Pruitt for months, just, floating in the winds. The White House tried to fire him.
At EPA.
Yeah, at EPA. And so for Coats, it would just create a lot of bad headlines if Trump fired a person who had been critical of him on Russia. You don't want to create another Comey situation. And so I think it's been extraordinary to watch Dan Coats, a longtime senator, really go against the president in some important ways. And he said he's going to keep doing his job and keep telling the truth as long as he can. And so I think it's kind of an independent DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, and we're going to see how that plays out.
You mentioned the questionable timing of inviting Vladimir Putin to Washington on the eve of the midterm elections. What type of reaction is that proposal getting, especially from Republicans in Washington?
So oftentimes here in Washington, when you get a foreign leader, every senator and congressman wants to get a meeting, say with Macron or with Theresa May. They want to, bend their ear, get a picture for Instagram. But if Vladimir Putin comes to Washington, he's going to be out in the cold, except for at the White House. No invite to speak at Capitol Hill. No meetings with Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi. And so the reaction is not very good. No one in Washington wants him to get invited here except for President Trump, and his advisors are trying to scuttle that a little bit. It kind of reminds me of a case when Trump, he loves to invite leaders to Washington, but in this instance might not be the wisest course of action given how badly Helsinki went.
Okay, switching gears, a rare and welcome chance to discuss agricultural policy brought in by a Trump tweet. On Friday, he writes, the price of soybeans has fallen 50% since 5 years before the election. A big reason is bad, terrible trade deals with other countries. And soybeans, especially recently, have really plummeted. And there's speculation it's because of concerns about these tariffs and China being the #1 consumer of soybeans. How do we think this cuts? Obviously, free trade is very popular in Washington, less so out in the parts of the country that won the president the election. Where do we stand with issues like soybean prices?
Yeah, this is the first time I've talked about soybeans on air. There was a great article by Bloomberg's Megan Durrison that pointed out that soybeans have lost a lot of their price because of weather. There's good weather, so there's a lot of supply out there, and so it's not just related to foreign trade deals. And so, Trump, he threatened to, enact tariffs on all $500 billion of imports from China. That would lead to a lot of concerns across the economy. And if you look at the local newspapers of Midwestern states, you see tons of headlines about how the trade war is hitting them hard in terms of agriculture and manufacturing. And so a lot of Republican senators, they are pointing to that and saying this is not good for our election prospects and just not good for the economy as well. And Trump, he said today he's willing to have the stock market and the economy suffer as long as he tries to get his pound of flesh in terms of trade deals.
Okay, I want to try and touch one more base. I may have buried the lead. This could end up being a giant story. According to multiple reports, Friday afternoon, Robert Mueller has indicted the New York City madam who was connected to former Governor Eliot Spitzer when he had his sex scandal. What does this indictment mean for the Russia investigation? How is this connected to Robert Mueller?
So this person is a longtime associate of Roger Stone, and so this could mean that they are closing in on Stone, who himself is a longtime confidant of the president and was an original political advisor. And they're looking at Stone's contacts with Guccifer 2.0, which is a person who is a Russian agent passing along WikiLeaks information to Stone and also just releasing, leaked, hacked emails. And so if Stone was colluding with foreign agents in how he got information out there, that is not good news for Stone. A lot of people are worried about him getting indicted. And so if those indictments prove true, I think Roger's not sleeping well tonight. Also interesting that this, New York City madam, it seems like she's in every scandal that has touched New York recently. So that's pretty wild.
It is. Daniel Lippman at the end of a wild week. Thanks so much.
Thank you.